One of the biggest struggles when building a side hustle or a startup is how to acquire your first few users, especially those that will be paying for the use of your product or service. I therefore decided to explore how other successful companies went about it and tease out all the lessons that we can learn and be able to apply to our own journey. I spent a couple of hours digging through every interview, essay, and article that I could find about how Airbnb got their first 100 customers with literally zero marketing budget. And it's interesting, what I discovered completely changed how I think about customer acquisition. This is Airbnb today, worth over $100 billion. But back in 2007, Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia were two broke designers who couldn't even pay their rent. They literally started by putting 3 air mattresses on their apartment floor, but taking a detailed look at your story, here's what most people do not point out. See, everyone talks about their Craigslist hack or their famous hero stand, which we will talk about soon, but those weren't actually how they got their very first customers. The real story is way more interesting and way more actionable if you're starting from scratch. But what completely blew my mind was discovering the one piece of advice that almost every successful startup founder wishes they had known earlier. Advice that Paul Graham gave them that doubled their revenue in just 2 weeks. So in the next 8 minutes or so, I'm going to break down exactly how Airbnb went from 3 air mattresses to 100 paying customers and the 3 specific strategies you can steal and apply to your own startup today. Let's start with the real beginning. October 2007, San Francisco. There is a massive design conference coming to town and Brian and Joe noticed something interesting. Every single hotel in the city is completely booked. Thousands of people are coming to town with nowhere to stay. And that's when they have this almost embarrassingly simple idea. What if we just put some air mattresses in our apartment and charge people to sleep here? They throw together this super basic website called airbedandbreakfast.com, and here's the crazy part. They actually get 3 people to pay them $80 each to sleep on air mattresses in their living room. But these weren't random backpackers or college kids. These were professionals, people who sent LinkedIn profiles and resumes to prove they weren't going to murder them in their sleep. Here's what's interesting about this first customer story. They didn't have a grand vision or a massive market analysis. They just solved their own immediate problem. They needed rent money and accidentally discovered that other people had the exact same problem they did. Think about it. How many times have you had a problem and assumed that you were probably the only one dealing with it? That assumption might be costing you your first customers. Fast forward to August 2008. The Democratic National Convention is happening in Denver and 80,000 people are about to descend on a city that doesn't have nearly enough hotel rooms. This is the perfect storm Airbnb has been waiting for. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of just hoping people find their website, they do something most startups are too scared to try. They start cold emailing local Denver bloggers, not big media outlets, not major publications, local bloggers with maybe a few hundred readers. And here's what happens. One blogger writes about them, then another picks it up, then local TV stations start calling them, NBC Denver, CBS, ABC, and eventually CNN runs a national story about these 2 guys renting out air mattresses. The result? 800 properties listed and about 100 bookings over the DNC weekend. This is their first real proof that the idea could work at scale. But here's the thing, this didn't happen because they had some brilliant PR strategy. It happened because they were willing to do the manual, unscalable work of reaching out to people one by one. And that brings us to the most important lesson in this entire story. In 2009, Airbnb gets into Y Combinator and Paul Graham tells them something that sounds completely backwards. Says, go do things that don't scale. At this point, their revenue has been stuck at $200 a week for months. They are basically going nowhere. So Graham gives them this advice that changes everything for them. Fly to New York, meet your customers or your users in person, go to their apartments, talk to them face to face. So Brian and Joe literally spend their weekends going door to door in New York, looking at their host listings, and what they find is brutal. Terrible photos, confusing descriptions, completely wrong pricing. They start taking professional photos themselves. They are rewriting descriptions. They are helping hosts figure out the right prices. This is the CEO and co-founder of the company doing work that a minimum wage employee could do. And here's what happens. Their weekly revenue doubles from $200 to $400 literally overnight. For the first time ever, they start seeing real sustainable growth. Now, I know what you are thinking. That doesn't scale. I can't personally visit every customer, and you are absolutely right. But that's exactly the point. Here's what they learned from those visits that they never could have learned from analytics or surveys. Their host didn't understand how to present their spaces. The platform was fine, the education was missing. That insight led them to build all the host education tools and resources that Airbnb is famous for today. But it started with unscalable manual work. But we haven't talked about their most famous unscalable tactic yet. And this one is absolutely legendary. For 2008, they are completely broke. Credit cards are maxed out. The company is about to die, and they have possibly the most ridiculous business idea in startup history. Like, they are going to design and sell breakfast cereals based on a presidential candidate. That's Obama. So they called it Obama Oats and Captain McCain's, and they sold it for $40 a box. This sounds insane, right? But here's what happens. It goes completely viral. They sell out all 1,000 boxes and make $30,000, enough to keep the company alive for a few more crucial months. And Paul Graham later said this cereal campaign was one of the reasons why he decided to invest in them. Not because selling cereal was a great business model, but because it showed they were default alive, which means that they would find a way to survive no matter what. And as a startup founder, that's one huge thing that you want to be. Like, find a way to survive no matter what happens to you. So now here is their most famous growth hack, the one that everyone tries to copy. They realized their target customers were already hanging out on Craigslist looking for short-term rentals. So they went ahead and built a bot. This was technically incredibly complex, at least that's what I found. That's what it allowed them to do was it lets their hosts cross-post their Airbnb listings directly to Craigslist with just one click. The result was massive. Suddenly, their listings were getting seen by millions of people who were already looking for exactly what they had to offer. But here's what most people miss about this story. The Craigslist hack wasn't some brilliant technical insight. I mean, this is my personal opinion, but it was the result of those manual conversations with hosts. Like, they learned that their hosts were already posting on Craigslist anyway, so they just made it easier for the hosts. All right. So what does all of this mean for you if you're trying to get your first customers? I've identified 3 specific lessons that you can start applying right from today. Lesson number 1. The best startups solve problems the founders actually have. Brian and Joe needed to pay rent. They weren't trying to disrupt the hotel industry. They were just trying to survive. So ask yourself, what problem are you personally dealing with right now? What frustration or what is frustrating you about the tools or services that you use every single day? Your first customer might be someone exactly like you. Lesson number 2. In the beginning, manual work beats automation every single time. So don't build a chatbot. Have actual conversations. Don't send automated emails. Write personal ones. I know it feels inefficient. I know it doesn't seem like real business work, but this is how you learn what your customers actually need. And when you begin, that is exactly what you want to be doing. Learn what the customers actually need and give them what they want. That is why they would stay with you. And lesson number 3, don't try to pull customers to a new platform. Go to where they already are. If your customers are on Reddit, be active on Reddit. If they are in Facebook groups, then you join those Facebook groups. Airbnb didn't try to convince people to stop using Craigslist because they already mentioned they were using Craigslist. They, however, made it easier for people to use both platforms together. And that is a strategic decision that you want to do when you also work on getting your customers. So remember that surprising insight I mentioned at the beginning? Here it is. That advice that program gave them, do things that don't scale. And I've read about this advice sometime in the past, so I was happy discovering that it was to the Airbnb guys. This isn't just startup advice. This, I believe, is life advice. Every successful person I know has a period in their story where they did work that felt inefficient, unglamorous, or something that is beneath them. But that work taught them things they could never have learned any other way. Airbnb is now in over 220 countries and territories. They've completely changed how we travel. But it started with 3 air mattresses and 2 guys willing to do whatever it took to solve a real problem. So here are your 3 takeaways. 1, start with a problem you personally understand. Your best customers are people like you, and if you understand them well, you'll be set to solve their problem. 2, do the manual work first. You need to do the manual work first before you think about automating anything. Talk to customers, visit them, understand their real needs before you try to scale it. And 3, meet customers where they already are. Don't make them come to you. You have to go to them because it is difficult for you to get them to come to you. Find out common ground, find where they are, and go to them. If you found this breakdown helpful and you want more stories like this where I dig deep into exactly how successful companies got their first customers, make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell so that you would always be notified about new videos. And here's something I'm curious about. What's the biggest challenge you are facing with customer acquisition right now? Go ahead and drop it in the comments. Let me know. I read every single one of them and it helps me figure out what videos to make next. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, bye bye for now.